So a very big welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us today for our December 2023 edition of AMAASE, Ask Me Anything About Social Enterprise. This is your opportunity to ask those questions you have, those social enterprise questions. My name is Leah Bordelin, and I am the Associate Director of Programming for a number of centers at the University of Calgary at the Haskayne School of Business, including the Trico Foundation Social Entrepreneurship Center. And today I am very happy to be your host. Just a quick note that today's session is recorded for those who aren't able to attend the live session and want to go back and rewatch. We will share that session with you. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that the university and where I'm sitting at home is situated on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. And this includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, including Siksika, Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations. This also includes the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, which is the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. And the city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. I hope if there's someone else joining us from other lands, please feel free to share in the chat. Great, Treaty 6, thank you. I strongly feel that we're all treaty people, and that this treaty is a responsibility and a relationship that we're all involved in, and I take this really seriously. So it is great to see that we're honoring that and learning where everyone is situated at the moment. So AMAASE is our monthly opportunity for members in the ecosystem to access and ask questions of the panel of capacity builders that we have here. This is held on the second Wednesday of every month from 3:30 to 5. Just so you know, all the questions that you're asking, we can provide information, but we can't provide legal advice because we aren't acting lawyers that are able to offer you this sort of advice. Just as a caveat. So this session is designed for you, the audience, to be the driver of this discussion. So it's your time and your questions that we are all here for. And I invite you to get your questions ready. Some of you have done this already and shared them with us. And I will probably just call on you and ask you to explain a little bit about your question, but we're very excited to have you all join us. I am going to introduce our panelists for the day. First, and I'll just go in my order that I see here. First, we have Dan. Dan, welcome. We also have Jane joining us. We have Brittany. And we have Jerome joining us. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. I guess I'll put myself up here for now, too. Does anyone want to get us started with a question?
I will. I'll jump in. I didn't put my name up there. My name is Ryan James, and I work with the Community Counseling Support Center online, and it's a low-cost counseling service for individuals, and we train graduate students in counseling, and then they do all the work and providing low-cost to no-cost counseling services for people. So I don't know if I'm a social enterprise. We're not a not-for-profit, so I've been looking at it and I've kind of gotten a little confused in the literature and things like that and what people are saying and defining as a social enterprise. So the first question for me would be, what exactly is a social enterprise, and am I a social entrepreneur, and can you put those two things together and all that kind of stuff? And so that's my question.
I'm looking at Dan.
Yeah, who's going to take that one?
Sure, I can jump in. Thank you very much for the question. It's a very common one, to the point where we've actually done a blog explaining the definition and what we think is the bigger conversation about not whether you are a social enterprise, but how you want to use business models to serve social needs. So that'll be in the chat actually now, so I encourage you to look at it. But very basically, I think one of the reasons you're confused is there's no legal definition in Canada as to what a social enterprise is. So I'll certainly give you the definition that Trico uses, and it does reflect most of the definitions in Canada. But you're going to have to be careful. So if you ever approach a funder that works in social enterprise, you're going to have to look at how they define social enterprise. So again, I'll give you our answer, but use it as an asterisk and always be careful when you're speaking to somebody what they think is social enterprise. So Trico defines social entrepreneurship as using business models to serve social needs. We deliberately make it a very kind of wide tent because it's all about nurturing people who want to use business models to serve social needs. And in terms of your other questions for us, and I've seen some people who organizations define social entrepreneurship and then social enterprise, and they're completely different. We don't do that. If you take the word social out and heard entrepreneur, you'd think, well, you're talking about a person. If you heard entrepreneurship, you'd think, well, you're talking about an activity. If you heard enterprise, you're probably thinking you're talking about a venture, right? So for social entrepreneurship is the activity, social entrepreneur is the person, and social enterprise is the organization. It can like just be that simple. And I'd encourage you to kind of keep that focus. So the question you have to ask yourself is, are you using business models to serve a social need? Now, just based on the very brief description you gave me, I think you are, but I would be interested to know whether you think you are.
I think so, because when I formed it or put it together in my head and then put it on paper, I had to do a business plan and I had to get funding. And I had to say, hey, here's the business that I want to do. But then when I talk to students and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, you see the light of social advocacy light up in their eyes because we're doing a low cost funding. And I just want to kind of have enough to keep it running based on the people coming. So it's not necessarily for profit, but I know what we're doing is profit according to business models by being able to pay our expenses and all that kind of stuff, or pay a supervisor to be around. That's all for profit. So that enterprise activity is business based and it's a not for profit. I really don't want to go, well, that's tongue in cheek. I don't want to go to other people for sustaining the business, except for the people coming who are sustaining the business because they know what they pay or whatever they can pay helps sustain it. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
So I think I am, yeah.
You understand rule number one of keeping the doors open, which is more money has to come in than go out.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I think is really interesting about social entrepreneurship is that it says, okay, how do we use business tools to make that more possible? Why shouldn't what you're doing make use of every business tool that any other kind of small business uses? Whether it be financing, whether it be just best business practice. So I would agree, yeah, you're social enterprise. And the good part, I mean, what's the best part of all of this is that it's more than just return on money. It's more than just paying out dividends that are money. It's paying out dividends that are social benefiting community. So
And just to pick up on the conversation you've had with Jane, you're overlapping some themes, and it's probably good to distinguish them. So just because you're a social enterprise doesn't mean you're sustainable, right, as a business, which means you're going to have to think about it. And just because you're a social enterprise, that doesn't necessarily mean you have a certain legal status. So for example, when you say not for profit, that's a legal status, right? So that's like a separate issue, and you're going to have to distinguish them. But the way we look at it is social enterprise is like a party with no bouncer. It's really easy to get in, but the key is not getting in. It's what you want to do once you get to the party. So I would encourage you to think of the issue being less whether you are or aren't in the party, but what you want to do now that you're in, right? So it's like how you want to think about using business models to maximally serve ultimately what you want to do, which sounds like providing counseling to as many people as possible in low cost, right?
Yeah.
So the really intriguing discussions now are going to be thinking about how to set up various business model possibilities. And you would be amazed at how many options there are out there.
Okay.
And, Trico provides a number of products and tools to help you wrap your head around that.
Yeah. And I'll just jump in. So I'm with Trico too. So just so you know, I'm bouncing off of what Dan's saying. But so when I saw you sent your question ahead of time, so I was able to do a little investigation, which is always fun. So when I was sort of looking at your organization yesterday, what came to mind to me is have you looked at other organizations that run and operate in this field in a similar way? And one of the things Trico is really big proponents for is learning from people who have been there, done that. And so one that came to mind for me was Calgary Counseling Center, because Calgary Counseling Center is able to use a sliding scale in which people self-report their income and they pay based on their income, right? Different from what you were looking at is based on your website, you sort of have a lower end option cost wise. It's lower than what they would pay for like private practice by far. And then also some pay what you want offerings, right?
Yeah.
And so learning from others who have done that is huge. And the other thing is there's so many different ways to be a social enterprise. And so looking at the different models and how they work, one of the things we talk to organizations a lot about is pressure points. So what pressure points exist in your model? And as you're looking at maybe serving a clientele that you're not charging market rates to, or you're looking at something like a pay what you want model, is you want to be aware of operationally, what does this actually cost me to run, and where are the pressure points, right? What are the maybe sometimes it's even figuring out what's the balance of people who are paying $50 versus people who are paying pay what you want that will keep and I know it's online, but our doors open, right? And so one of our tools that we have is called the Blender Canvas. And I find it's really interesting to work through with pay what you want models, because one of the sides is looking at can you pass your costs off to your customer? And if you can't, how are you going to overcome that gap, right? That funding gap. And pay what you want is really interesting, because sometimes you might get somebody who's paid, like they might be going, I'm going to pay a market rate for this. Like I'm going to pay it over. And then you also get people who can't really afford much at all, right? And so finding that balance sometimes really key. And so that's what I was sort of thinking about as I was looking at your organization is those pressure points that exist, and figuring out what it looks like for your organization, and what sustainability looks like for your organization.
Yeah. Good. Thank you so much.
Yeah. If I can add one thing, one of the key things I was kind of thinking about a little bit as well is how you define social impact, right? So how do you know that you're doing and achieving or moving the needle on the community that you're looking to work with, or minimizing barriers for around counseling? So being able to define that, lean in of like who are you serving? And why are you serving them? If it's around, and being able to map and define the barriers or the different components of that customer profile or end user, so then you can then have a better idea of, are you actually affecting change in the long run? If you were running this for 1 year, 5 years, how would you know if you're making an impact? And so, being able to, like, you'll probably cultivate this, we call it the impact thesis, like being able to define your impact around your company. And then, what are those KPIs or, those key things, impact metrics that you now track, that you're able to say that we're actually consistently evaluating this annually. And this is how we know that we're fostering impact in this way through our enterprising model. So I'll just add that in there as well. Who uses your product and services, and what the barriers and challenges are for them. If you can just start to like map out a couple metric pieces so that you know how you're minimizing the barrier, I think that's going to also help you in being able to tell the story. And then it just reinforces that you're obviously a social enterprise as well.
Right. And I think that's what you all mean when you say there's business models to show what we're doing socially. And that's that impact piece is what you're talking about, Tron. That's what I'm hearing. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's helpful.
Thanks, Ryan. Do you have any more follow-up questions there?
Tons, but I don't I don't want to keep it all on the counseling support center, but if there's others that have questions, but yeah.
Great, thanks. Well, maybe we can come back.
Sure, yeah.
You know, there's lots of time today, so thank you so much. Safira, I saw that you had a question that you shared with us, and I'm wondering if it might be easier if you just share your story with us, and our panel can give you some of their thoughts, putting you on the spot a little.
I was hoping I wasn't going to go next. That's okay. Here we go. So I had an experience as a caregiver for my grandma using home care in Alberta in Medicine Hat. And anyway, it was just an eye-opening experience for me. And I thought, wow, I think I would be curious to spend some time learning more about what alternatives might exist out there in terms of delivering home care and how that can be done in a more collaborative sort of bottom-up sort of way. And so I'm at the U of A and I'm doing a master's in community engagement. And one of my supervisors is Dr. Mary Becky, who's really involved with social economy. And she really kind of kept like, you know, planting these beautiful seeds of, you know, kind of thinking about a different model. So anyway, I've kind of been reading on this for the last little while. And I found that Quebec has this really interesting home care cooperative model that they've been using since the mid-90s. And it just really, it checks off a lot of boxes in terms of what I see as some of the issues around home care these days. So basically I'm going back to my community and I'm just in an early stage sort of community capacity development project, some focus groups where bringing together people who are already kind of active, engaged citizens, talking about our role within home care as citizens, talking about our capacity to be involved in home care in a more active way, and then sort of looking at how a home care cooperative may or may not fit in my community. And so I'm just curious because I am kind of new to, I guess, cooperatives in general. And so with the expertise that's sort of in the room here, part of my questions were, what are the strengths and barriers around the development of home care cooperatives in Alberta? Why do you think perhaps a Quebec model, so in Quebec, they're using multi-stakeholder cooperatives to do these home care cooperatives. Why do you think that has maybe not caught on in other parts of Canada? And what is needed at the individual community, municipal and provincial levels to facilitate this development?
Maybe just to start, I will point you to, if you haven't found them already, the Alberta Community Cooperative Association, which is probably the best resource in the province for how cooperatives work and what they can do. I don't know that any of my fellow panelists have worked very much with cooperatives, but I'll make two observations about them as they've come to us for funding from time to time. I found that one thing is that it's sometimes challenging for cooperatives to figure out how to work together, because there's a lot of people in the room, all of whom may have ideas. And so often when I've worked with cooperatives, that's the first challenge, and often where the whole thing breaks apart. So I think you need some resources behind you who can help you through that. So that's what ACCA is really focused on doing, is to get over those sort of people barriers around making a cooperative work in real time for a business. When I have a proposal coming to me from a cooperative, one of the first questions I ask is, okay, how are you going to make real-time business decisions? Which is always an interesting conversation. And the other one is that they appear to be legally challenging here, legally expensive. I've been astonished by how much it costs to set up a cooperative. Now, it may be that all the ones I saw were going about it the wrong way, so that's why I'd say go and talk to ACCA. There may be template shortcut help that they could give you to actually understand the cooperative model. But that's just from personal experience and seeing what's come to me. And I've often wondered too why they aren't more active here, because the Quebec models are interesting. Even Manitoba and Saskatchewan have, it seems, more cooperative models around this kind of thing than I'd expect. But we have a long history of cooperatives in Alberta, and go talk to ACCA and see whether they can help you get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I'll just add. So my first thought was ACAA. Definitely, because we don't have a ton of co-ops approaching us that I've found. And we would work on the not-for-profit co-op side of things, not the for-profit co-op side of things. So we just, it's something that we don't see a lot of. And then my thinking would be, once again, like talking to people who have already done it. So I would wonder what maybe might be in place in Quebec that makes it a more enabling or a more friendly place to do that. And is there something in Alberta that does make it more difficult? Would be interesting, I guess, to find out. And then, yeah, or if there was any other ones across Canada you could talk to about how they've done it themselves, right? Is acting as those industry specific. But I can't talk that much about co-ops, so I'm sorry.
More broadly, because maybe the questions I'm asking are not the right questions for this group, but like this is like an early stage, really community engagement discussion around like the early, not even development, like just the early idea of like how this might fit for a community. Would you recommend any sort of resources that might exist in terms of a social enterprise development, like kind of facilitating those early collaborative discussions?
Sorry, I'm muted. So I was just writing down your piece. So definitely in terms of like early stage discussions, I would think about things around like scanning what is available and what isn't working, what is working, which I'm sure these are all things you're doing, but then also talking to the beneficiaries and people who have experience with that about what is not working to kind of identify. But the other thing was, as you're talking about a social enterprise model and you're looking at using a business model, is ultimately what would be the funding mechanism for that? Would it be customers? And if you're going to be charging families for this type of support, what would that look like? What could they afford? Like, these are all things that you could find out with low resources put out, right? Like things that you can ask that can do those. We do have some resources that look at things like where do you want this to go, and what actually would make sense for we talk about it as a mountain. I'm really bad. I start doing the hand movements. But really, like, where is this headed, and what would it look like for your organization or for this cooperative? What your goals are, because I think that would also being really clear about what your goals are would also let you know if a cooperative model in Alberta is what makes sense to help you achieve those goals. So one of the things we talk to organizations a lot about is determining what impact you want to have before you kind of decide what model you want to have. And so all this research that you're doing into Quebec and talking to people are great legwork for you to say, hey, this is the impact we think we can have. This is the type of model we think we can have. And then we also have some tools. I just haven't applied them this way necessarily, but we have some tools helping organizations think through what needs to be in place. So what steps do I need to do? And my clients need to do, my beneficiaries, my co-op members, like you can kind of go all these different layers, but looking at, we call it key steps and costs. So looking at like what needs to happen to make this, or what needs to be done to make this happen. And then also prioritize what needs to happen first, right? Like what would be my priority if this is something I was developing? And then finally, we talk to organizations a lot about testing and learning. So is there something that you could test and learn, that you're staying in the affordable loss zone, you're not putting out a ton of resources, that you could do this, right? So as Jane said, actually setting up a co-op seems incredibly expensive. Is there something that you would be able to execute on a smaller scale in a way, just to test out some of those key assumptions that your model is built around? So those are the kind of the things that I'm thinking of, but it's sort of this interesting place, because you're working on this as a researcher too, right? So you're doing a lot of this stuff and learning from others as well. So it's hard to know exactly where you're at, but those are the things that come to mind.
Just to push that a little bit further, I play a game with some people who come forward with proposals about where do you want to be in 5 years, and it's some of the things that Brittany was talking about and the processes is that what do you really want it to look like walking around day to day? Who's making the decisions? Who's running it? So is a cooperative model really what you need to have the kind of discussions internally to deliver on it? And is that the best way to drive the revenue streams and deal with the expenses? So there's pros and cons of it. Probably, if you can, talk to some of the people in Quebec and really pick apart everything about their business that they'll tell you, and then decide, and then play the game of, okay, 5 years out, 10 years out, what would I want this to look like? And is that the best way to get at it? So some of the things Brittany was talking about will walk you through some of the questions that you would do in that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I see some of those questions like that would be kind of what I'm pitching to the focus groups, right? Because I'm talking sort of about a collaborative stake in, like a nonprofit type of organization. Yeah, go ahead.
While you're thinking about that, I'm going to say that's very different language than a cooperative, which is a formal structure. So yeah, is it a collaborative? Is it actually a formal cooperative? Because that's a very
I just meant
legal.
Yes, I just meant the development towards, like, if the collaborative, if there was enough people that were sort of interested in a more formalized route.
Yeah. But there may be that it may not be that particular structure that it is that you end up. I mean, be open to thinking about
other types of structures.
What's going to work best? I mean, you need the right entity to carry the work that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe don't presuppose what that is.
Yeah.
Do the research and look at the examples, but be open to thinking about what it might actually be.
Yeah. Okay.
Like what was it about the cooperative model that struck you?
I just think
that speak to you.
Yeah, I mean, I am open. It was just sort of I mean, the sort of structure of it being more democratic, in Quebec's example, and with these multi-stakeholders, like you're bringing in a diverse set of stakeholders so that those people all have sort of an equal voting share at the table. And like with care, it's sort of a reciprocal exchange between caregivers, care receivers, and sometimes those voices are not kind of front and center. So I think that's an interesting it's an interesting sort of model that could fit. I think the model, because the revenue stream for this can align very nicely with the funding that comes through AHS, and there's sort of strategic goals that are happening with self-directed or direct funding models that they're sort of expanding upon right now. So I think the structure, if it were to exist, would need to be formalized in some way. Although I am also just very interested in like just in generally kind of mutuals where people are coming together collaboratively, and you know, you don't have to have that formal structure, but for this, in terms of accounting and stuff like that, and accountability, I think that would be something. But
Another possibility to explore is maybe speaking to rural communities in Alberta who don't necessarily have the medical infrastructure to see how they're surviving and coping with these needs. So maybe reaching out to a Rural Association of Manitoba might give you some intriguing leads as to how communities are coming around to grapple with this and give you some lessons and insights. And as well, thank you so much for your question and sharing your journey. It's really fascinating. So I hope you do continue to stay in touch with AMAASE to let us know how you go and how we can help in the future.
yeah, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Safira. All right. Do we have any other questions out there?
This is Jane. Sorry. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely, we can.
I'm not at home and I've had a few technical challenges today. I apologize for that. While we're on the seniors topic, I work for an organization called Cycling Without Age. And so we go into care homes and to people's homes who are living at home and take them for bike rides on these specially designed bikes. We call it a Trico. And one of the interesting things about our model is it was originally invented in Copenhagen in 2012. And in the first 4 years of operation, we spread to about 43 countries. In Canada, we have we're approaching almost 200 bikes across Canada now. And the model, and one of the reasons we were able to grow as fast as we were is because we've really embraced the term holacracy. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that model, but it really is where you take all of the decision making, all of the self-governing, and you decentralize it. So because it is almost as simple as buying a bike and taking people for bike rides, there isn't a need for a lot of overhead and a lot of administration. So one of the challenges I'm faced with is when I'm looking at grants and looking at raising money, because I'm the national, I run the national arm. So we are volunteer based, and even my chapters, which I mentioned how many bikes we have. Chapter wise, I think we're about 130 chapters across Canada. Most of them are all volunteer as well. So when it comes to, I look at a federal grant, and most federal grants are very large and care about the number of employees I have. When I look at local funding opportunities, I see, they care less about the number of employees I have, but that the activities are staying very local. So I feel like I'm kind of in purgatory right now in that we don't really fall, we've done a beautiful job of building an organization based on volunteers. We've done a beautiful job of keeping very low administration costs. But I feel when it comes to funding, we're almost penalized for all of those great things we've done. And so I guess my question to the panel is, when, from a funding perspective, where you would see an organization like us, who would understand, who would kind of, who should we be going after? No, that's not my question. I think my question really is, how do we accurately represent our organization in a way that is appealing so that people understand we have a national organization, so we do it once, do it well, and distribute across the country. So right now, the government's spending lots of individual money doing the same thing. And what we're trying to do is do it once, do it well at a national level and roll it out. So just wondering, I've rambled a lot.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Why
Yes.
volunteers and not build towards paid staff?
It's a great question, and we've definitely been making that shift towards more of a paid staff position. I think because the international drive was to go that way, I think we were just following suit with our technically head office, in that was kind of a standard set at the beginning. And I think obviously to be sustainable, we need some employees and some paid positions. But
So it's because here's where I'm going with my
Mhm.
question. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend I have any expertise in grant writing for you
Mhm.
on this one. But to me, the thought process is that you say you have no overhead, but you actually have huge overhead that people are donating to you, right?
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Because
Yes.
all that time, all those
Massive. Yes.
right. So you have massive overhead that you're managing
Yeah.
to have donated to you.
Mhm.
I think it'd be interesting to do the exercise about, okay, who are the customers who think this should happen? Whose pain are you actually addressing in community that then wants to see this happen? And to me, that's almost the through line even to find the grants. Because
Mhm.
if you can find who the customer is, and the customer may be part of government that wants this to happen for whatever health benefits. I mean, I can think of all kinds of
Yeah.
boxes that could be ticked. It's almost a matter of making yourself think about yourself as having a service and a product you need to sell to them. You're not looking for a present.
Mhm.
You're providing a benefit that, do they need? And if they need it enough, can you build a business model that makes it go, that actually hires the real staff that you need to make this happen? I mean, I think that we as community need to understand what it costs for these things, and sometimes we donate time and we pay for it through time we give to you to get it done. But is that really so? That might change how you even focus and present your thinking about grants and what you go and look for the revenue streams that you're searching out. It's not really an answer for you. It's more like more homework, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, which I always appreciate, right? And that's what I love about these calls is whether you're giving me homework or others, it's it is
Yeah.
a good reflection point, and I
Yeah,
appreciate that, Jane.
Ryan's put a great question in the chat. Does having staff open up funding? Yeah, it might be that. Okay, we're going to build a real business model here that actually encompasses having people. You may have grown. So volunteers are kind of like people who are angel investors, right?
They are.
They've put blood, sweat, they're shareholders to a certain
Yeah.
extent. So you start to think about it as an equity
Mhm.
investment by those people in your business. That maybe changes how your thought process works. I'm not saying you'll be able to build it without any volunteers, but how do you shift the business model? How do you apply best business practice to maybe get yourself to a different kind of stance in how you present to the world and who you yourself think of as customer? I'm not sure it would work. I have to go through. I'd like to sit down
Yeah.
and look at the numbers and figure out, let's puzzle through this. But to me,
Mhm.
that would be what I would start poking. Is the assumption that it's a business model. Anyway, Jerome's got his mic open.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, what's the signals through the noise? And so I'm curious of, what are you learning about the service that you're providing to your end user, but also to the actual customer, which might not be the end user, right? And so I'm curious around what's the data telling you, and that can be through case studies, right? And you probably have a lot of that stuff from participants that participate in your programming and all that type of stuff. But I'm also curious around when you talk to AHS or primary care center or all these key health stakeholders that close to the problem that you're looking at solving and providing a service to, what are they saying about that problem, or what are they saying about seniors getting active and senior isolation, all these other components that you're playing in this sandbox area? I'm curious around what's the data in that space. What's the data from your program and service? And then if you're able to map out those case studies into personas of key powerful strangers and organizational groups, then it gives you a better picture around how to align your business model with the actual problem that you're actually solving. Because you might be perceiving the problem that you're solving totally differently than how the healthcare center or ecosystem might be viewing it, even though you're trying to get funding from them, or even government, because they might not view you as you solving that problem for them. So I'm curious around that. That's the signals through the noise, and then collecting a little bit of data. And you probably already have the data. It's more of synthesizing it and analyzing it to get the information to be more aligned with that target audience. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that insight. And I think, I think from a value prop perspective, which is, I think, a lot of the conversation, we have a pretty strong value prop. We have a lot of research done worldwide. There's a lot of support for, being outside alone, let alone, our program and stuff. I guess what I'm still grappling with is when I see the grants come out, and maybe it's my own personal barrier, is I feel like I'm misleading them by saying we've got all of these people. Because like I take Hamilton Burlington, for instance, as one chapter. They have 65 volunteers. We've taken out over 1,500 people on a bike ride in one summer. Like, we've got large numbers, but it doesn't, because when you look at our financial statements, when you look at our head count, it puts us in a different category. And I'm just trying to reconcile whether we still, fight that and just go kind of more the corporate sponsorship route, or we, still bang our head against government funding. And that's the struggle I think I'm really
I think you
facing.
need to rethink who your customer is.
Yeah.
And who benefits from this. I think Jerome's right. There's all kinds of benefits and it's more than how many people you put on bikes. It's what's the health outcomes for seniors, mental and physical health, from being on bikes. I'll bet somewhere. And then why? So why do we as a society then want to make sure that you have more people out there on bikes?
Yeah.
Because it's going to drive down healthcare costs. It's going to improve. And so it then becomes, you're not looking for grants. You're looking for the government to hire your chapters all across the country on contribution agreements, because you're where it's at in fixing this particular problem. So it's whose pain are you really addressing? You're addressing a healthcare benefit that is needed, rather than give us a grant because we're doing a good thing and we have a bunch of volunteers. It's just shifting how you're thinking and presenting yourself.
Yeah. No, thank you both. That really resonates. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, and Dan might want to talk more about this. There's different customer options as well. So is government your customer, right? Is that what you're looking for? Because my first question is, if you've got such low overhead, like, I'm not quite sure about how revenue is being generated, I guess. And so I was going, okay, well, why do we need grants? Like, what do we need the grants for? And that would probably be one of my questions. But then it took me this whole time to think of what the organization was named. And I finally remembered. I put that in the chat box, but this is an example of a Canadian organization.
Oh yeah, they're great.
Bikes. Yeah, you
I own two. Yep.
Oh, perfect. So they use a different business model. They don't use government as customer. Right on their page, you can buy it outright or you can rent to own. So they have a different look around customers. And so that would be the other thing is for me, I would start thinking about if you're kind of falling outside, like you're feeling like you're falling outside of these grants, and maybe it's not the best fit for you, or maybe that's not where you want to spend your time, are there other customers as well and other revenue streams that might help offset some costs or might be your primary focus, right? There's a lot of decisions that can be made within your model.
And just to build on Brittany's point, the founder of A-Linker is absolutely extraordinary. So you
Yeah.
may want to talk to them about building.
I have actually. I present her
Okay.
when I present
Perfect.
adaptive bikes, because when I've asked to be keynote, I try to cover a large number of adaptive bikes, not just our own. Yeah, she's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Thank
But
you.
have you talked to her about the specific issues you're struggling with right now and how to build community and think strategically about that? Because I think she would be a fun.
Yeah, we've had some good conversations, but we have a very different model in that one of our bikes services 200 to 300 people, where hers is one bike, one person.
For sure.
So it's a
But
little
she's
bit different,
building
but yeah,
community, right?
yeah.
So, but
Mhm,
I also think, and we get this a lot,
mhm.
is there's a fundamental challenge in the social impact space where social impact organizations, as well intended and as much momentum as they have, just don't know how to experiment, which is like figuring things out as quickly, as efficiently, and cheaply as possible. So you talked about your different options, right? So you need a process to help you kind of target these options, but then experiment and figure them out. So, hey, sponsorship, what kind of experiment test do we want to run to see if sponsorship is much better than banging our head against the wall of government? For government, what do we need to test? How much longer are we willing to kind of pursue this and things like that? So you don't have to use the Trico materials, but we specifically try to break down for organizations how to do the mountain journey, which is your various targets and options, and then how to experiment. So you can give that a shot. So ironically, you may not have like a funding problem per se. You may have a don't know how to experiment quickly, cheaply, effectively, efficiently as possible challenge.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Do we have anyone else who wants to ask us a question?
I was going to
I'm
say, I
really
think this aligns really nicely with the question Tamara sent in.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. And I've been waiting for Tamara to offer it, to see if she wanted to share with us. I think now might be a good time if you're interested, Tamara.
I'm happy to. I just didn't want to jump in and well, drop the question on everybody and then stop this great conversation. And I always like listening to everybody share and sort of where they're at in their journey. But I guess to back up a little bit. So hi, I'm Tamara. I'm with Women in Need Society. So we are a social enterprise. We operate in Calgary, for those of you that aren't familiar with WIN. So we're a charity. That's our legal structure. And we adopted a social enterprise model for how we operate. So we have 6, soon to be 9 thrift stores that operate in the Calgary area. We're hoping to expand beyond Calgary, but we have 6 thrift stores. And so as you can appreciate, there's a couple of things that we do. So not only do people come to our stores, low income individuals, they come to our store, let's say they need to furnish their home or buy clothes or whatever they need to do. So we get goods donated to our organizations and we sell them in our thrift stores, which generate revenue for our social good, which is we help women and their families thrive. That's our mission. That's our mandate. That's what we do in life. So every dollar that we raise goes into that purpose. So, but we also have this charitable arm. So the charitable arm leads into some of the questions I think people have had earlier around, like where do you go for funding and all these other kinds of things. So the question that I put, and I don't know if you want me to read the question or if you have the question, Leah, I don't know. Does somebody have the question? Jane, you're like, no, don't read the question. Okay. Basically,
That's it.
I'm going to read it yourself. Go ahead to give us, yeah.
Because I had it in the email and I just sort of figured I would expand upon it, but I wanted to describe like the challenge that we have. Oh, there it is. We've hit a roadblock. Thank you, whoever put that. Leah.
I just put it in for you.
You're the best. Well, I was just going to do it verbatim because I do have it, but I was like, I'd also noticed there was typos. Embarrassing. There's a couple of spelling mistakes. Embarrassing. So in the spirit of forgiveness, but as I was talking to Brittany, I said, you want to know what some of the challenges that we're facing? I think the challenges we're facing is people, even though we, I think no, I'm going to erase that based on the conversation tonight. I was going to say, we have a better understanding of what social enterprise is, but I don't think we do. So we run into this roadblock with our funders. So our funders don't seem to understand. So when we put an application in for funding, we're often putting our own money into the application, because they're always asking the questions like, where are you getting additional funding? Or, who else is funding to this project? It's like, we're using our own money to fund this project, but we're applying for funding from you, because if we have the ability to recoup some of the money back from our charitable arm, then we can divert more things into we can divert more things back into our social programs. Like, this is what this allows us to do, this teeter totter, right? So we want to cover off as many admin costs as we can with the social enterprise, but we want to bring as much revenue we possibly can for programs. So we have to fill the gap. So it's this teeter totter. So that's kind of that analogy that I used. So this is what we hit. And so I wanted to sort of have this conversation about how can we communicate this better? Because I'm not sure we do. And I know we use words like, social impact and social good and, business models and all these other kinds of things. But ultimately, if we're going to talk about value prop, how do we do a value prop for a funder around a social enterprise? Maybe that's this diatribe that I put in, or that's put in the chat. Maybe that's what we're talking about. It's what is the value prop for somebody who normally would fund a nonprofit? So there's so many nonprofits out there. There's so much need out there. How do we differentiate our amazing organization that technically has these sustainability components and all these other pieces? We're so blessed because we have money for admin, we have money to play and innovate and explore and build and grow, but people on the outside don't get that. I'm going to leave it there. I'm happy to follow up with some clarifiers if the committee needs that, but I would love to have people's perspectives and thoughts on that.
You've put your finger on a huge challenge that we have because of the beginning uses of a social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. And I can be rude about, I think Debbie's here, but maybe she'll forgive me. I'll be rude about some bureaucrats who unfortunately,
Oh, sorry, I put myself on. I'm gonna laugh, Jane. Okay. Go.
Yeah, I'll be rude about it because I was one for long enough, and I know what I didn't know, and I know what my colleagues, many of them, didn't know. We need to change how a lot of people in government at all levels think. We have a situation where some parts of government are saying use social entrepreneurship models, and then other parts of government not understanding how to read a financial statement, so they don't even understand what it is they're looking at. And so you get the kind of responses you have, or even worse, I have clients who've been denied for government grants because they have our debt financing on their financial statement, and the person processing the grant thinks that that means bad management. It's an automatic default position, and that's got to change. We have to help governments understand that it's a little more complicated than that. And if we want people to use social finance, we can't penalize them for doing that. And I have proof from all levels of government, so it isn't just one level. All of them are guilty of it one time or another. And I've been kicking both ministers of the Crown and their civil servants in the shins now for several months about all of that challenge. So I don't know how we're going to, Ryan says easy, how are we going to fix this? It's a big thing, but you're not alone on that. If it's any consolation whatsoever. You said your charitable legal structure. I'm going to beg to differ. Charity isn't a legal structure; it's a designation by So it might come down to how you may be big enough that you need to figure out how to handle your income reporting by separating out legal structures about how money comes in, so that your legal piece that has charitable status might be the one that goes after grants, and then the other part of but that's a bigger discussion and a bigger challenge to wade through and to see whether it really is necessary. But yeah, we have some work to do. And then the last piece that you kind of mentioned was some government people, politician level in particular, see social enterprise as a replacement for grant financing, and that's got to be front and center as something that's just not on. I was asked to write a plan for the creative partnerships part of the Department of Culture, Arts, Culture, and Status of Women. I'm almost got that right.
You're correct.
And thank you. And the point number one was that this isn't a replacement for the important and critical role that government plays in supporting the work of the nonprofit sector, because we need that work done, and we need those things carried out as a community. That's what we've put government in place for. And so we need to help them understand that this is a set of tools and different instruments that, if handled properly, will help nonprofits realize more and better revenue streams to carry out the very important work. But that government is not going to be off the hook just because organizations are using social entrepreneurship. I know that's really not answering your question in a way. It's just pointing out that you're absolutely at the bleeding edge of the challenge of the promise of this approach to getting stuff done. And I don't know what, I mean, other than repeating and trying to help everybody understand what it really means, is something that needs to go on, and how we'll get there. And there's little pockets of happiness and where the light goes on sometimes and people actually get it, and then sometimes it goes away. But we have to keep working through that. And the siloing of government doesn't help, because one department won't talk to another, and sometimes two parts of the same department won't talk to each other, don't really know what each other's doing. So yeah, it's a big thing. Debbie, did you want to see how I brought you out of the darkness there?
Yeah, I'm sorry I was late. I really do enjoy these sessions, and I am always a silent observer in many cases. But Jane and I have had many chats over the years, and she knows my position on this whole thing around how important and just how important social enterprise development is, and the impact. Now, I'm living in rural Alberta, so you were talking, Jane was talking a little bit about, you were suggesting that she and I think it was Safira maybe talked to rural communities a little bit about some of the issues that are out there. I'd be happy to talk to you anytime about any of those things. I also sit on the local Mayerthorpe Legion board. So when I was listening to the seniors, and I've also sat on many as a volunteer health advisory councils that are all rural based. So I can talk about issues related there. There's many things. Anyway, so all I was thinking was Veterans Affairs Canada, talk to them, talk to the Canadian Legion Association. That's a big, huge branch thing. So, there's some good potential partners out there, I guess, is what I was thinking as you were talking. Safira, I missed the beginning of your session, but you were talking about cooperative models. And I was just looking at one here recently, and I can't remember now. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. And I went, why didn't I think of the cooperative model for social enterprise? And so there's lots of stuff out there. I've been around in this kind of world in the nonprofit sector for 20 years, I guess. So, and I've been on this bandwagon of social enterprise for probably as long as Jane, or maybe a little longer even, but I'm also in government. So we did have some social innovation stuff happening many years ago. I can think about 2011 to 2014. I brought it up again with our ADM when we had our big event this fall. And I said, we used to have this wonderful social innovation fund that people like me could work in a collaborative and try and do specific projects. I think out of 34 we did one year, I had 4 of them that were successful. And then it disappeared. So I think we're talking about a little bit more the creative partnerships and crowdfunding. I helped do the training labs for those sessions, and we're looking at sort of really invigorating that particular program. So it's a new thing. We're moving sort of in that direction. It's not really that new, but it is to us for government. So I think we just have to keep, as Jane put it, pushing, nudging. Anyway, so I'm here, I'm listening, I will take ideas forward, but I'm just one voice. And I do see, other organizations that are talking a little bit more. And of course, we've got Alberta Seed, we've got Nevada, there's lots of stuff out there now. So I think as people get a little bit more informed, hopefully my colleagues as well need to be more informed. Then we can maybe move the button forward a little bit further. But corporate funders are all on board already. There's so much sponsorship and wonderful support out there from the corporate side. I think that maybe we need the corporate side to come and talk to government. I'm not sure where there's a novel idea. Anyway, just saying. But you know what I'm saying though, Jane, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyway, I support everything that's being said here all the time. I'm sorry I'm so quiet at times, but Jane's brought me out of my shell. So
sorry about that.
Anyway, thanks for letting me speak, and I'm sorry I'm not as much help as I wish I could be. So
you're trying, that's for sure. And I'm sure, I'm sure the others will have some things for tomorrow, but some of it may come down to, you may be big enough in your operations to think about, okay, how are revenue streams handled and reported? And maybe it's time to do some of that until we can have this great massive change of thinking that I'm hoping someday we'll have.
Hi, Tamara. I was going to take a different approach. I think about our creative studio, and part of the reason why we put a creative studio in the Innovation Hub was because we knew that social entrepreneurs, social enterprises had a challenge around telling the story and the branding of the impact, but also the success of the business. And so I'm taking the perspective of, how are you cultivating that creative confidence around storytelling? Because I think your business is obviously successful. It's you have 9 thrift stores in Calgary and looking at expanding into other places. Your customers know your value proposition. That's why you have so many. But there's also a combination of the other folks that are your key stakeholders. Do they know the story? And the story is probably different. That the story that they need to hear is probably different than what you're currently branding out there. That's not on your website. And so how do you cultivate that and really look at that as being a cornerstone of change and impact that you're fostering? And then how are you getting that to those key stakeholders that have influence and power? And then I think there's a combination of we always say sometimes you have to also educate your customer and your stakeholders. And so how are you doing that through your research and development? Taking a line from Dan around those mini experiments that you're piloting to see if something sticks on the wall. You got to be doing multiple of those. And then once you identify some type of champion within the organizations or government or funder, etc., then it's really leaning in for them to be your powerful stranger internally in the system, in the government, because they're the ones that's going to move the needle forward without you being the one that's the loudest voice at the table or trying to be invited into the room. So I think there's a opportunity there. I think I'll put in a link to our creative studio. I think we can have a conversation around how are you fostering that creative confidence, and then how are you piloting those small storytelling opportunities that I think are really vital for you to really move the needle.
I'd just like to second that. That's just one of the things when we were doing the creative partnerships, the crowdfunding program, and we know we don't have as much upswing on it as we would have liked. But I think one of the challenges that some of our nonprofits and charities are struggling with is the whole storytelling aspect. And if you can't tell your story really effectively to make it look and give the emotional appeal that you need to, grab your donors, then it's really difficult to share with others as well. So I love that you're doing that, Jerome. That's awesome. So I will have a look at your hub too. So thank you. That's great. It's super well needed.
So I just wanted to add on, and I think it ties into everything we've heard, but in terms of looking at potentially as maybe you're leading edge in this and you're coming up against brick walls, are there different types of funding available to you as well that might be less about like educating people on social entrepreneurship, right? So I think about, you mentioned, like in your question, you mentioned we want to show them that we're a good investment because we work as a social enterprise. So maybe a loan's an option, right? Maybe that's something that your organization would look at. If we're good to invest in, maybe we invest in ourselves by doing a loan. Or we had talked about sponsorships. My guess is you probably get people who volunteer their time, like corporate organizations that volunteer their time. But in terms of what Jerome's saying as well, is how do you have to communicate with maybe those non-government funders that it's amazing that you're giving us staff time and people come down for a day and they help us out, but we also need financial support too. So how do you actually communicate what those needs are for your organization? So I would just also flag that there's those pieces. And the other one is, and we've talked about this a number of times, but also, are there any other organizations out there that are doing a really good job of communicating with funders, or even just communicating how this works within their organization, right? Yes, we are generating revenue, but yes, we've also got these amazing things happening socially. And so I would just maybe look into some of those too to see if they'd be willing to chat with you, or check out their website and see how they talk about it. Like, you're not going to see their grant applications. They might share them with you, right? but there might be some stuff to learn in that area as well. So just sort of thinking differently than we traditionally think about these things.
And you know how much I love doing that, Brittany. Thank you for that. No, seriously, it is. I appreciate what everybody has said, because it's, I'm new to this role, but I'm not new to this space. And so I find it very interesting after several years in this space that we're still sort of having some of these challenges with this conversation, and it's sort of difficult to navigate the path forward. But I just want to say, Jerome, like your comments too really echoed, because I think this is something we don't do very well. It's like we're typical charity concept in that, again, it all goes into our program. So we don't market ourselves. We don't talk about what we're doing. I think there's sort of like a dearth of skills sort of within the organization to be able to understand how to do that. And so, yeah, I think that could be a really, really, really strong, there's thrifters. People like thrifting is the thing. And so, we're not tapping into that. And so kind of understanding and being able to navigate that space. And Debbie, I appreciate what you've said too. I mean, I know creative partnerships is something that we've always looked at. But again, back to the challenges around that, the component of to be able to raise the funds, you've got to like activate your community. Well, some of our community may not be activated in the way that Creative Partnerships wants us to do, right? So there's just all these great things, but we're just trying to figure out how to land it better. But I really do appreciate people's comments and their advice, and I love this committee. And Jane, I think the world of you. And I mean, the comments around maybe we should just apply for the social finance, and I'm like, really, that's shocking. We would love to do that. So I think it's something we need to do, right? But anyway, sorry, I digress. But I really, really appreciate this group so much. And we're going to try and come up with a boilerplate, sort of a template that will help us. And we're going to try and include it in every one of our funding proposals. So we're going to start tracking, like, where are we finding some of the most challenges? Is it within corporations? Is it within foundations? Is it within the government? Like right now, my assessment is it's everywhere. It's not just one body. So it's not just the government. I think actually the government of Alberta has been probably better in a lot of situations because they do understand that social enterprise and they are trying to invest in it. In fact, I did have my former colleagues come in and take a look at our operations, and they sort of said, what do you need from us? It's like, well, we need to not stop putting us together with other charities and nonprofits, create a separate opportunity for social enterprises, because we're competing against we're competing against each other, and we're apples and oranges. We're not even in the same category. And then I also said, like, if you can help with some policy things, right? Like there needs to be some policy around this work, and and also create opportunities for organizations like ours. And they did offer, I can't remember what it was called, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but there's an opportunity that's coming up where we'll be able to be in front of some social finance investors. There's like a training, it's kind of an opportunity for us to provide comments and feedback as we're going through the experience, and that we get these opportunities to promote and profile ourselves and what we're doing. So it's kind of like a shared learning opportunity. But I can't remember what it's called. The person that I know that told me about it, he's on paternity leave right now. So I couldn't ask him what the program was called, but when he gets back, and Debbie, you know who it is, first initial M, last initial K. So you know who I'm talking about. He told me the program. And so I will circle back when he's back from leave. And I'm happy to share back with this group what that, whatever the group is called. So I'm so sorry. And anyway, I really appreciate this group, and I think that's what we're going to start to do, is sort of track where we're getting some more obstacles, and maybe it's coming back and sort of saying we're finding actually within corporations or within these groups we're still hitting roadblocks, and maybe we need to do some more targeted work. Jerome, I look forward to connecting with you. Yeah, I really do. So this has been thankful. Thank you so much. Dan, I don't know if you have anything else to add. You've always been sort of a pillar of strength for WINS, and we always appreciate your support, but I don't want to cut it off without getting some of your comments, so I apologize if I did.
Oh, no worries, and thank you for the very kind comments. Trico was probably the pillar of strength helping you out, as opposed to me per se, just a small cog in a big machine. But yeah, there's lots of issues and possibilities. Building on what Jerome was saying, and this isn't advice, this is just thinking out loud. Sometimes actually leaning into your strength is the solution. So actually, I find a lot of funders are attracted to momentum. So if the organization as well as the concept. So if you have real momentum in the social enterprise, explain to them how their funding can tap into that momentum. And another thing that seems to really resonate with funders is next level stuff. So if you position it as them helping you to get to like the next level. But the challenge with that stuff is it's still as you've pointed out, you're arguing over divvying up the pie, right?
Yes.
If you look at initiatives that actually enhance your social enterprise, that could actually be growing the pie. So that could be something you can explore, not as an alternative, but simultaneously.
Yeah, I like
And
that.
also to build on Brittany's idea, maybe it's not loans, by all means explore that. But wouldn't it be cool to explore this idea of, let's say grants aren't suitable. What about this idea of a repayable grant, so that it has, like, say, no interest and really long payment terms, like beyond what most social finance options. So I'd love, if you're finding that the loan thing wouldn't necessarily work, maybe exploring with you if we could maybe create this new kind of stepping stone for funding of grants, social finance, and then repayable grants.
I like that. I'd be willing to do that. I don't speak for the organization, but I'd be willing to do that. So that's pretty amazing.
If I can add just one thing, I know we've received some funding from Alberta government to support nonprofits and social enterprises to kind of grow and scale and develop diverse revenue streams. And so where you get connected to a business coach and really map out a roadmap for success. And so look out for that for the new year. And we're going to be obviously, it's going to be with all of our partners. That's part of AMAASE that's going to be supporting some of that. So I think there's some key things in the works for that. And then the last plug, our January 8th Breakfast Club, it's going to be centered on our creative studio, and it's all about connecting social enterprise businesses around how do you tell that story and getting some tips and tricks. And that's going to be part of a 3-part series, as well as a sales focus as well. So we're going to be doing also a sales conversation around how do you get your first customers, how do you build on your first customers, as a 3-part sales piece, because we're seeing similar challenges for some social enterprises around that too. So yeah, so I'll leave that there, and then we can follow up online as well.
I actually think, Jerome, what you just spoke about might be the thing that the person from the GOA was signed us up for. I think it might have been. I just don't know what it's called, but it sounds very, very similar. So maybe it's Jerome's program that he just spoke of. Yeah, I'll confirm, but thank you for that.
It's probably under Jordana's program.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was like
Yeah.
I don't, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm just joking.
opportunity, it's really cool, and we're looking forward to it because I think it just gives us different perspective, right? So yeah.
I think it's Jordana and Dan's program, if it's the one I'm thinking of.
That's why it's not moving forward. We're arguing over what the name should be. Who
Oh,
gets
so then I shouldn't feel bad because whatever it was called isn't the actual name because it's to be named. Oh, I feel so much better because I felt so silly. I'm like, I don't know what it's called, but it sounds really amazing.
Yeah, I've been referring to it, that thing that Diana, the Dan and Jordana are doing. That's how
Okay. All right. That's probably because I think actually they used Jordana's name while they were talking to us too. Is sort of anyway. Okay.
All kidding aside, full credit should actually go to the government of Alberta and Creative Partnerships, which actually drove this initiative. Jordana and I are just, Jordana more than me, but we're just helping this great vision and commitment of the government of Alberta to help social enterprise in Alberta.
Thank you for that work, Dan and Jordana.
Great. Well, this has been, as usual, a very exciting and interesting AMAASE. We have 5 minutes left. Is there anyone else who has a question they would like to ask?
I just have a comment because this is my first time ever trying to do anything social enterprisey with the whole crew of people that are also social enterprisey. So my juices are flowing. Sorry for the descriptive piece, but Tamara's passion for her work and things like that, and Jerome and others who have talked about the impact. Debbie, you talked about rural. You talked about, and those are stories, and I'm just so pleased and tickled and like ready to go at her because these are the stories. And you gave me a bit of a voice, Jerome, like with the impact that we have is personal stories for the crew that we're working. But it's not just that. You talked about clients having a personal impact or impact of social enterprise and generally overall, even though it's a business model, even though it's business, but it's personal impact and personal stories. And I think that's the social part that's so important to me, is that my client who says, hey, this counselor, student counselor did this wonderful work with me and I got over this hump. And then the student is like, wow, I did something new in session and now I feel confident in my skill set of being a new counselor and going out there in the world. And I haven't captured that. I've captured that internally, but I haven't put that out there for other people to see and maybe even funders to see. And I have no clue how to do that. So I know how to tell a story, but I don't know how to do that in a business proposal or things like that. So when you talk about mentors or people kind of coming alongside and helping us do that, I'm in. So I'm already filling out things on the social innovation hub place, and I hopefully, so I'm just saying this has been vital for me and for our center. Thank you.
Well, and I think that is an absolutely wonderful place to finish our conversation today. I'm actually going to I just thought, you know, we're moving into a new year. So it would be nice for us to all sort of say goodbye to each other for this year and look forward to seeing each other next year. So I'm putting us all back in the regular. Now I have to figure out how to remove my own spotlight. There we go. And we can put ourselves in gallery view so we can see each other. Does anyone have anything they would like to share that's going on in the next little while before we say our goodbyes? I'll start by asking our panel members if there's anything you'd like to share. Dan, Brittany, Jane, Jerome.
I can jump in. I'm always intrigued by how much Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol actually shines a light on the key elements of social enterprise. So either Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to have a blog published in Pioneers Post, which is this international forum for social impact writing, on what social enterprise can learn from Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. So we'll be sharing that on social media. Look out for it. It's a story I've been wanting to tell for a long time.
Excellent.
I could hop in. I already put a bunch of stuff in the chat. I think yeah, I think our breakfast club is a cool opportunity just to be connected to other social entrepreneurs the first Monday of every month. And then we bring in different special guests and highlight different companies that are social impact focused and social enterprises. And then yeah, just join our committee or community mailing list and all above, and you can reach out to myself and I can help with anything that you might have afterwards as well. So feel free. I'll put my email in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I hope that those of you that joined today and, you know, have started asking questions will come back and share with us how things are going. Give us your, you know, your tips and your tricks of how things are going, or just update or come back and say, I need help. Because we would love to have you. We would love to have you here again and again and invite more people. All right. Well, on that note, I thank you so much. I hope you all have a chance to have a restful holiday. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year. So take care.
Thank you so much, everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.